Now I really want to see the other autopsy to see, is there trauma to the body? Is there something that happened?
I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it.
I have no doubt that what we're listening to and what she did is credible.
Here is an audio of Treth calls to Triton Shepard's father.
Don't try and run now, you. Your son is a and he's about to get all the way. Don't run now, you. You guys are gonna get what the coming to you. I know he killed that little kid, man. You guys aren't. Your wife ain't racist.
How can the father of somebody who murdered another person go and try to receive donations using the name of the murder victim? You know what you've done. I'm 22 years old. I'm just a bit older than your son, Warren. I can't believe that I live in a world with people like you and your son. I can't believe that I live in a world with evil, racist, white people who then go and falsely claim that they praise God while living racist, evil, selfish, harmful lives, while they take the lives of innocent people. God's light shines down for Nolan Xavier Wells. The truth will come out, and you are evil. You are evil to your root. You decide it. And I hope that you soon change, or that soon you face every pain that you've brought upon other people. I hope that your son faces that same pain, and the pain that he brought through his racist actions, and continues to bring through his racist actions. You have raised your son to be a racist, heartless person who has taken the life of another person. And God, I hope that you burn in hell for it.
Justice for Noah Wells, son for a son. Justice for Noah Wells, son for a son. Justice for Noah Wells, son for a son. Justice for Noah Wells, son for a son.
Justice for Nolan Wells. Justice for Nolan Wells. Father of a murderer.
I figured out the Nolan Wells timeline. I know how they messed with the GPS. I figured it all out. I figured out the lies that are based in truth. I figured it all out, and I've got proof. But stick with me because it's going to be a long video, y'all. Now, I found a 15-page Marine Patrol report that had lots of little details that prove that the boys had been lying. So I've already shown how at 1:30 in the morning, the initial Lieutenant Odom with the Jackson County Sheriff's Office said that his deputies spoke with several of the friends who traveled to the island on the vessel with Nolan. And they said that he left in the company of an unknown female and that he chose to remain on the island.
So what was the next step? Did you guys ever engage with police? Or?
Yeah, so the first time I talked to the police was July 7th. I talked to the lead investigator, and I told him my whole story, top to bottom. Dot every I, cross every T. I told him everything I knew, every little detail.
Well, that's a lie now, isn't it, Warren? Because you talked to them at 1:30 in the morning that night. I mean, did you just forget to tell the cops about Katie? Because it's not like you didn't know it was her, or you didn't know how to get in contact with her.
The girl that he was with, Katie, had texted somebody that she heard people yelling.
Correct.
Nolan yelling.
Yeah, and I have a picture of that. She texted my buddy, and the next day everybody was panicking. Everybody was texting Katie, because she was obviously seen with Nolan the whole day at the island. Katie sent a message to my buddy the next day and said, oh, this is the last time I saw him. He's really sweet. But she also mentioned that the last time she saw Nolan was when my buddy was yelling at him to get on the boat.
But Katie says that she assumed that she went on the boat after y'all were yelling at him. And let's not forget that the last time you saw him was 3.
Well, the last time I saw Nolan was 3 o'clock. And Nolan was cradling a girl in his arms.
And yet for some reason around noon, the name of another girl who hadn't even seen Nolan in a year was given to the patrol to go interview, saying that she was with that group, not Katie. They also gave the name of a couple of other friends who they weren't able to get in contact with. And despite having a picture of a text message from Katie, funny how you didn't share that with Officer Tatum. Probably could have cleared up some stuff real quick, right? Now let's get to the data. Now, at about 1:30 on July 5th, they were doing a flight of drones based on the relation of the last known anchor position of the Atkinson vessel, which I have documented right here. 4:30, Officer Strickland contacted Jennifer Pyrone, who was Wyatt's mother, who told them that he had already spoken to officers earlier in that day, but they were happy to cooperate with any investigation. And she let this officer take a picture of the GPS. Officer Strickland observed the track line showing Pyrone's vessel location on Horn island, then gave coordinates. I'm going to need you to remember this exact phrasing. It's going to be important later on. Now, this was the GPS coordinates from the picture that the officer took, meaning that these coordinates had to be a different one that was verbally given over the phone by Wyatt. And you'll notice they're quite different. Now you'll notice that this incident report says the involved entities are Bart Edmington and Jerry Adkerson, not Wyatt. Even though Wyatt is 18, he should be on this report. And you could argue that they were just giving the names of the people that owned the boats, but somehow I doubt that 21-year-old Bart owns that boat. You'll notice on this report that 2 different pieces of GPS evidence were collected. So now we're going to go to the July 8th report where they came and they took those GPS coordinates from both the Adkerson boat and Bart's boat. Yellow is Bart, blue is the grandfather Jerry. You know, the same Jerry that called and canceled the sea tow as the sea tow phone call was being made. Now, mind you, this is 3 days after the police had come and spoken to the mother and gotten the GPS coordinates. Now, Bart had a germane GPS map chart plotter. Jerry's boat also contained a germane GPS map chart plotter. Now, I had to look up the difference between waypoints, tracks, and routes. So waypoints mark specific spots. Routes connect them in a planned order, and tracks record your actual path. Now, according to that GPS data, there is no movement from 11 to 4:30, but we know that that's not true. Warren has never been able to logically explain how they ended up so far away from the shore. Because according to him, he said at 3 o'clock, that was the last time he saw Nolan, Bart was trying to yell at him to get on the boat. His brother got into a fight, so he got his brother to come over there. That's when he saw that it was all sinking, because he said this.
There's a lot of people on, so that it drags water in, and eventually, I think over time we were out there for a couple hours, the boat just started filling up with water, so I popped the starboard side hatch, and the battery was completely underwater.
Yes, but according to Warren, he had just seen Nolan, like neck deep, cradling a girl at the boat next to them. So how did they end up in 31 feet of water at the 4 o'clock call? There's an hour in between that. If the battery is submerged, how would they even get away from the sandbar? You can see in the background of this picture, they are far away from people. And yet this GPS is saying that you were stationary the whole time. But why? Especially because we have actual fucking proof right here. We have the coordinates that Wyatt's mom gave them the second time, and the cop took a picture of the GPS. Compare it to the GPS coordinates in which they were trying to get a tow from. But what if I were to tell you that not only does a waypoint need to be physically saved on this exact type of GPS, you have to intentionally say, mark this spot, or else it doesn't automatically save. It records your tracks automatically, but those are just saved coordinates. And it turns out you can actually delete tracks. It's super easy. You just go into the main menu and you delete it off of your data. So why is this GPS data, which is right here, so much further away than what the GPS says it is later? There is no data included in that GPS report that explains them going from here to here, unless someone went in and deleted those tracks. Because they probably dropped that waypoint once they anchored, which would explain why Warren said they showed up at 10:30 and the GPS says that they showed up after 11. And so then it wasn't until half an hour after the canceled tow that they dropped another waypoint. And mind you, the exact same GPS was used in both boats, and Wyatt/Jerry's boat has the tracks and routes where Bart's does not. And again, it tracks it automatically. So you have to intentionally delete those tracks. And why did they do that? Well, it turns out Jerry Atkinson just so happens to be the owner of Ocean Marine Group in Ocean Springs and Gulfport, which is literally a boat dealer. So guess who's gonna know that information? We already know Grandpa Jerry was in the mix, because the only way that he could have canceled the sea tow before it even started to head out is if Wyatt had called Jerry first and Jerry told him to call for a sea tow and then canceled it for him. him, which would explain why he couldn't give any descriptions of where the water was. How high was it? We know that the sea tow did not bring in the boat. In fact, Bart's mother came on Facebook and said that there are pictures from my son's boat of the boat about to be towed, which is clearly who is about ready to tow them here, as Wyatt is on the phone. I can tell you 100% that this is not a sinking boat. You can see Bart bringing them in this picture. But Bart was supposedly the one yelling at Nolan to get on the boat, remember? Why would he be yelling at Nolan to get on a boat that's sinking? Unless he was telling Nolan to get on his boat. And Warren accidentally explained what really happened with the engine. Whatever happened with Nolan happened on Bart's boat, allegedly, which is why all of Bart's information was deleted. So here's what happened. Both this one and this one confirmed that there was a fight that broke out on the beach. Started out with him, ended up with Warren's little brother. His uncle says, we gotta go. They hop on a boat and they leave. He grabs his drunk younger brother and says, we're getting out of here too. 3 o'clock. This whole caravan is trying to get the hell out of there because they're drunk and fighting. Wyatt's boat was in such a hurry that they couldn't figure out how to put the freaking trim down, which caused the motor to overheat, quickly stranded them, and Bart had to come help them. The time that Bart shows up, something has happened between him and Nolan. They're all distracted trying to fix the bilge pump because it didn't trim down. The waves were crashing over the boat and into the bilge pump, short-circuiting it. During this, some people have figured out that Nolan is gone. Other people just think that he's passed out or something, which is why Wyatt calls his grandfather to figure out what the F to do. And as the phone call is being made, more people are figuring out something's wrong with Nolan. That's why they didn't start moving again for 30 minutes. They were coming up with a plan and figuring out how to make it work.
Not only has the timeline been analyzed by the Cajun Navy, the U.S. Cajun Navy, based on all sorts of statistical data, new photos are emerging. Take a look at this photo before we go to the Cajun Navy. Look at this. Check out what you're seeing. Look at all the boats surrounding where Nolan was. Leave up the photo out to Caitlin Becker, senior national correspondent, New York Post, star of New York Postcast, their new podcast. Caitlin, what are we seeing?
Well, what we're seeing here comes from this new report from the United Cajun Navy, and you're seeing several boats strung together. This is one of the first images that we've seen of this certain configuration of boats there. They're all identified, one of which was the boat that Nolan came out there on. There's several others kind of anchored with it and tied up, which begs the question of where was Nolan when this photo was taken, because it's unclear if he's actually in it. What time was this photo actually taken? So what you're seeing here is, as you said, a potential pool of witnesses.
Hey, Caitlin, look at this. There's boat number 1. There's boat X. There's boat number 2. There's boat number 3. And there's a boat from which the photo is taken. Now, look in the water. There much has been made. Nolan Wells was drinking. Okay, well, apparently everybody was. They all have containers, open containers in the water. Okay, as far as I know, that's not a felony. Boat number 1, full of people. Boat X, full of people. Boat number 2, full of people. Boat number 3, full of people. People on the boat from which the photo was taken. Some of these boats tied together. You know what that means in my world, Caitlin Becker, joining us in the New York Post? Let me see, Caitlin, please. That means witnesses. See, when I look at that, I see witnesses. Other people say, hey, there's people having a good time. I see witnesses. Do you see all those people?
And a lot of them.
Who were they? Have they been spoken to? Have they been polygraphed? What can they tell me?
That is the question, right? We don't know from an investigative standpoint who has been spoken to, exactly who is in this photo, and what they have or haven't told law enforcement, because there hasn't been really any transparency there. But from what our reporting has showed, there have been dozens of people who have spoken to law enforcement as witnesses. But Nancy, we don't know if it's any of these people that you're seeing in this little cove area right here. And the timing, I think, is really important, because these images are taken right around, I think the timeline's about 3:30-ish, 4:30-ish, when the boat that Nolan came out there on leaves and starts taking on water. That's one of the pegs for the timeline. When these photos were actually taken, that is a peg for a timeline. But But what we don't know is where Nolan is. There he is. You can see that image right there. But we don't know is where Nolan was when that first image that we saw with all of those boats kind of tied together, when that was taken.
This is the footage at the center of a new wave of questions surrounding Nolan Wells's final hours. Not the autopsy, not the online noise, not even the reward money. It's 90 minutes on the afternoon of July 4th, the gap between the last confirmed sighting of Nolan Wells on Horn Island and the moment the boat he arrived on pulled away without him. 3 o'clock. That's roughly when Nolan was last seen. 4:31. That's when the Triton left the island. Between those 2 points sits everything we still don't know about what happened to him. And this past week, for the first time in a while, we got new material to look at inside that gap. If you've been following Nolan's case, subscribe now, because what we're about to examine could change how you see those 90 minutes. So let's go through it the way an investigator would, piece by piece, inside that window. Because the first surprise starts with the scene itself. For over a month, almost nobody could say with any confidence where people actually were on that beach. But a newly released report from the United Cajun Navy, the volunteer group that helped search for Nolan, gives us the closest thing to a spatial picture we've had so far. Buried on page 12 of that 22-page document is a photograph showing 3 boats anchored side by side off Horn Island that day. Boat number 3, the Palm Beach, and the Triton, Nolan's boat, which according to the report had taken on water before it ultimately left. 3 boats sitting near each other on a stretch of island that isn't especially large, which means for at least part of that 90-minute window, there were more people within sight of Nolan than just the small group aboard his own boat. That changes the question entirely. It's not who was on the Triton, it's how many people across 3 separate boats might have had eyes on Nolan at some point that afternoon, and how much of that has actually been gathered, cross-checked, and compared. The report doesn't have a confirmed roster, no complete GPS log tying every vessel to a timestamp, just a partial map of a scene with a lot more witnesses standing around it than we assumed. And out of everyone who might have seen something in that scene, there's one person whose account lines up with the timeline almost to the minute, 4:31 in the afternoon. That's the single most specific timestamp attached to this entire case, the exact moment the Triton pulled away. And it lines up with something Nolan's best friend has said publicly in a way that's hard to ignore. Warren Hudson has stated that he and others begged Nolan to get on the boat around 4:30 that afternoon, and that Nolan refused. 4:30. The boat left at 4:31, 1 minute apart. If that account holds up, it tells us something specific. Someone was close enough to Nolan at almost the exact moment the boat departed to have an actual conversation with him, not a distant sighting, a back and forth, close enough to plead with him to get on board. Which means the real question isn't whether anyone saw Nolan that day. It's what was said in that exchange, what his tone was, whether anyone hesitated or stayed a beat longer before the boat finally left. I'll say this plainly because it matters. A conversation happening close to a departure time isn't evidence of anything on its own. People miss boats for ordinary reasons all the time, but a detail this specific, sitting inside a case this thin on confirmed facts, is exactly the kind of thing worth testing against harder evidence. And this week, for the first time, we might actually have some. If the report gives us a spatial picture, there's a second piece of evidence that might let us hear something from that afternoon, the distress call. Audio released earlier by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources captured someone aboard a boat on July 4th contacting a private sea tow dispatcher. The caller says their bilge pump had failed and they were taking on water, asking for help. A short time later, the dispatcher notes the issue had been resolved and that help was no longer needed. For weeks, that recording mostly lived online as a talking point, clipped and replayed by amateur analysts with wildly different theories about what it proves. This week, that changed. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump confirmed the Wells family has retained actual audio engineering experts to formally review the call. Not internet speculation, but a technical breakdown of the recording itself. Number of voices? background noise, details a waveform can surface that a casual listen simply can't. If that call happened inside our 90-minute window, a professional analysis could tell us how many people were actually on that boat, whether the tone matches the dispatcher's "everything's resolved" note, maybe even background sound that places the boat somewhere specific relative to the island. We don't have those results yet. But there's a reason the family didn't stop at audio. They went after the body too, and what they found there raises its own problem. An independent autopsy, commissioned by the family and performed by forensic pathologist Dr. Roger Mitchell, listed both the cause and manner of Nolan's death as undetermined, pending further investigation. Mitchell said two things severely limited his findings: the advanced state of decomposition by the time Nolan's body was recovered, and the fact that key organs, including the lungs and portions of the neck, had already been removed during the original state autopsy. Without those organs, there was no way to establish whether Nolan drowned or whether something else played a role. Retaining organs for further testing is actually standard in a lot of unexplained death cases. It's not automatically suspicious on its own. But the practical effect is the same either way. The one piece of evidence that might have settled this definitively can't, which pushes everything back onto the 90 minutes and onto a different kind of evidence entirely, one that doesn't rely on anyone's memory at all. The family filed subpoenas in county chancery court, targeting Meta, TikTok, and WhatsApp, seeking Nolan's electronic communications and account activity from around the time he disappeared. Think about what that could surface. A message sent that afternoon, a location tag, a group chat where someone mentioned leaving the island. Even something as simple as when Nolan's phone last connected to a network could narrow the window everyone's stuck staring at. Unlike the audio, unlike anyone's public account, this doesn't depend on memory. It's a record if it exists and if the courts grant access to it. Those conditions matter because getting answers in this case hasn't just been about evidence. It's also been about who's willing to speak up publicly and what happens to them when they do. The reward for information now sits at $225,000 after Dr. Benjamin Hudson, father of one of the teens on Horn Island that day, added $50,000 of his own, saying plainly his family doesn't know what happened and just wants the truth. But that same intensity has a darker side. Federal authorities arrested 3 people this week over threats tied to this case. Families connected to it, including Nolan's own mother, have faced harassment serious enough to draw lawsuits, cease and desists, and even a bogus professional complaint that was thrown out within a day. The math is simple: a $250,000 incentive to talk against an environment where talking has already gotten people threatened. Whichever one wins out shapes how much of the truth about those 90 minutes ever actually reaches daylight. The Wells family recently met privately for the first time with Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers-McElrath and came away with confirmation that this case will eventually go before a grand jury. Standard procedure for an unexplained death, not a signal charges, are imminent. Investigators still say they don't currently suspect foul play, while stressing the case remains active. Everything gathered officially stays sealed until that grand jury review, which means, right now, almost everything we can actually examine, the boats, the timestamp, the audio, the subpoenas, is coming from outside the official investigation entirely. And that's exactly why this week matters. Because for the first time in a while, several of those outside threads are moving at once, all pointed at the same 90 minutes. A better map of where people stood. A minute that lines up almost exactly with a documented departure. A recording finally getting real forensic attention. A legal push toward digital records nobody's seen yet. None of it closes the gap between 3 o'clock and 4:31, but for the first time, there are multiple paths converging on it at the same time. And, at least one of them, the subpoenas or the audio analysis, could produce something concrete in the coming weeks. When that happens, we'll be the first to break it down. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel so you don't miss it.